Welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you all with me this evening for our March webinar on family bonds and family karma. I got drawn to this topic, and I've done quite a bit recently on interpersonal relationships and the bonds that we share with people, but I got drawn to this topic because of a couple of very interesting experiences that I had with clients. And I'll just describe those to you briefly because they'll kind of set the stage for our discussion of what it means to have a bond with members of our family. We usually think of that in very emotional terms, but I'm going to describe it in energetic terms tonight and show why that's really valuable information when we know about that and can perceive those bonds. So the first experience that I had, I got actually came by an email. Somebody that I was acquainted with said, I've been feeling really down, and they kind of admitted that basically all through their life they had kind of a heavy, sad feeling. They felt depressed through much of their life, even when they were having a good time, or as this particular person was, that spent a lot of time in meditation and feeling a lot of bliss in meditation, but still there was this background kind of feeling of being kind of down, heavy, depressed. And it wasn't serious, but it was troublesome to them because it was taking away from just basically their enjoyment of their meditation experience and their experience of life in general. And when I looked into that, I found some of the usual things from this life and made some adjustments in the energy of things that had happened to them in their past, things that we call karma, things that had produced some reasons to, perhaps, feel a little badly about the way things had gone. And then I started to look into past lives. And usually when I look into past lives, there's some, you might say, finite number of past lives that might be involved, that might be setting a person up for this kind of feeling in their life, this kind of style of functioning of their mood in this lifetime. But what I found was that it seemed practically endless. It went back very, very far, to a point I couldn't even determine when it was. It was 2,500, 3,000, 3,500 or more years ago. I couldn't tell. I couldn't count them. They were too far back. And but I just had this sense that throughout this person's life, there had been a situation that they had not resolved, not worked out, not escaped from, if you will, of being very aware of the suffering that existed in the world. And it was as though you could say they carried the weight of the world on their shoulders and had been doing so lifetime after lifetime. And I had never run into a situation like that before, where it just seemed throughout their existence that they had this feeling of the weight of the world on their shoulders. And, that's not an entirely bad thing, some sense of responsibility to the world, trying to change the world. And I got the sense that through the ages, through their different incarnations, they had played different roles. Some of them where they really were trying to solve problems in the world. Some of them they were just suffering in the world. And others where they might possibly have been the oppressor in some way, some opposite role. But that the net was that as they came to this lifetime, there was this long history trailing behind them like, like you wear I'm thinking of some kind of robe or cloak that would drag on the ground behind you, like a king might wear, and they walk into the what do you call the room where the king meets with everybody? Throne room, yeah, the throne room. And they would be trailing this, I guess you call it a train, this robe behind them. And it was kind of like that. It's like that's where they were. And so that posed a very interesting situation to help them in this karma to appreciate that that was how they functioned and had functioned perhaps many times in many incarnations, and that it was okay, but that they could put that down, that they needn't take a responsibility as a burden upon them, but they could take a responsibility simply as, oh, this is a task for me. This is part of my dharma, is to be helpful in the world, to give support to the people of the world and to the world itself, and just to work with that. And in fact, their current dharma of doing long meditations really was, to support the world, collective consciousness of the world, we like to say. And so it took a while, and it's actually still an ongoing process. I still check in with their energy every few days and just give it a little more support, because this has been present for so long that it's like we use the term archetype. It's the embodiment of a style of existing that it's a habit, if you will, at this point, that they're not going to change. And it's tricky because, in some sense, the soul has to recognize that it is no longer responsible in the individual sense, but is responsible in a more collective and a more general sense of just doing what it can, and accepting that it can only do a certain amount, and it's a great amount, but that's the status that it had to take. So that was the first situation that I ran into. And then I ran into another very soon after that, actually, where the family karma was, and the person's karma through history, it was quite different. It was more on the level of struggle and strain, and the feeling that life was difficult. And that was, again, a kind of existential feeling. It was so deeply ingrained from so many lifetimes, not as far back as the other one, but just some lifetimes, that they felt that life was just a very difficult thing. And even though they had some good things in their life, and life wasn't all bad, and there wasn't even a great deal of suffering in this life, actually, life was quite comfortable. Not extravagant, but comfortable, and not they weren't in a dangerous situation in any way in their place in the world. But that the sense that it was always a challenge, it was always like an uphill battle, if you will, rolling the image I had in my mind was rolling the marble up a hill, a big marble up a hill. And it was like you always had to work, and if you let go, it just rolled back down the hill again. So you always had to keep working at it and keep working at it and keep working at it. So there was this sense of just the exhaustion, you might say, that comes from a lifetime. They were somewhere near my age, a lifetime of working hard to just keep it together, just make life work for themselves and for their family. So those two examples got me to thinking about the connections that we have in our family, and what it means to be in our family, and what the family karma has been and will be. And I find that to be a very fascinating thing. Family networks are complicated, and when you look back and you see, in this lifetime, and then in the previous lifetime, and another lifetime, and another lifetime, there have been certain kinds of challenges that they have had to face that you realize that when you're in my position, that they haven't quite figured it out. That yes, life is basically always a challenge. There are good things that happen to you, but there are also very challenging things. And those challenging things, as well as the good things, help us to grow. The good things help us to appreciate, that there are joys in life, and that life is basically bliss. And then the challenging things are there to give us the life lessons and to pay back any debts that we may have accumulated, karmic debts that we may have accumulated from the mistakes that we've made, the poor choices that we've made, the being selfish and greedy, and hurting other people. Um, and, everyone has those experiences, but certain people, it seems like that becomes the nature of their life, is to struggle with these kind of challenges that come up that make life feel like it's just so much work. It's just so hard. There's so many things that happen to us that are painful or just difficult to deal with. And many times they're very personal kinds of things, meaning they're more the emotional connection, things that we have with other people rather than the actual physical challenges like not having enough food or being in a situation where life is threatened by war or other factors. So life can be very difficult, and that can produce seemingly, in some cases, generations or lifetimes. It can be either way or both. And many times when I look back, it really is both. I've seen that, in this incarnation and some previous incarnations, but then also if you ask about, what's the history of the family, these people, they lived in a situation that was very challenging. Maybe there was a war going on, and they may have had to flee, they may have been refugees, but even before that there were challenges in the family in terms of where they were living, persecution, or they just being in a lower class of socioeconomic class, so that they were very challenged. Through much of the history of the world, most people did not live very well, and life really was a struggle. And it was only the aristocracy that could even be said to have the kind of comforts that are pretty much standard in our lives in the modern world. So it's not unusual, of course, that people, if you look back in the generations, you'll find that there were those challenges. But for some people, they have a challenge and then they may work that out in 1 or 2 or 3 lifetimes. And then that's pretty much taken care of. They understand that aspect of it, and they move on to other challenges in other lifetimes as they come down into the present lifetime. And but what's striking to me was running into these people who had these multiple incarnations and generations, so that there was this established pattern in the family that really shaped their life, and you might say colored their life, made them feel that life had a certain style to it, suffering, challenges, painful things that they needed to learn to deal with. And so I found that it actually took a little time to work those things out with the people. And of course, this isn't really done verbally. I say a few things to people about it. We have a little bit of conversation, just so they know what's going on. But fundamentally, I have to go back and shift the energy of multiple generations of people, and that are fellow travelers, either as spouses or siblings or parents, and children, grandchildren, and grandparents, all of that. So there's sometimes a lot of work to be done, as you might say, to clean up all of that, so that you can bring an end to that family suffering, that family karma. And so that tests the bonds that exist between family members. And so I want to spend the rest of this session on the kinds of bonds that we have. Families are very special things, and I'm going to talk more about this next month too. But obviously, families involve more immediate or intimate or intense relationships. There's more energy involved and more of an actual energetic bond with members of family than there are with just members of the community that we come in contact with a very few exceptions. The nature of that bond, you can even think of it in kind of a physical way, because I perceive it often as an energy extending from the center of the chest, from the heart area, and communicating with the energy from others. And that does not have to be it's not like it's a rope or a cord or a tether, but there's that sense that there is energy coming out, and then that energy is received by someone else. And so the family bonds are shaped by these experiences, these challenges, these karmas that come to us, and they give a particular flavor. And of course, within a family, you may have many different kinds of bonds, many different qualities of relationship with the family members. Some people, the relationship may be very supportive, and you're like good friends. Others, it may be, which we say, an element of sibling rivalry. You don't even have to be siblings to do that, but just a certain element of rivalry between the two, which may be very, what we might call affectionate teasing and one-upmanship, or it may be very, very aggressive and even mean-spirited. And so that varies from family to family. Recently, I was at a wonderful play that was done about how estates get divided up and the history of that and the various legalities and problems. In days gone by, the division of estates was fairly simple because the oldest son got the estate, and then the others may have gotten something to help support them. Daughters often were left out. They were sold, so to speak, for the dowry to some man, and then they were, so to speak, done with. Now they were part of somebody else's family. But the division of property, has an ancient history, and the lack of division of property. In this day and age, there is more of a tendency to want to divide up property, and that produces a real test of the bonds between the individuals in the family, particularly the siblings, but also between the parents and the children. Grandparents may be involved, aunts, uncles, and cousins also can get involved, and that can really test that bond. And if you think of it as kind of like a cord that's connecting two people, but then each person has multiple connections with multiple people. If you think of those in that way, you can imagine that those cords get strained and twisted and, figuratively drawn out, causing a great deal of difficulty. And there's nothing like property to really get to people. And part of the reason for that, and one of the things I heard in this presentation, was that people really feel attached to property. To them, it is, to most people, it is stability. It is not just the land and, of course, the buildings where you live in, and the farm buildings usually, because traditionally properties, of course, were self-sustaining. They grew their own food, they had animals and so on, and other resources maybe on the property. And so people get very attached to those things. And if everybody is in agreement that, say, the oldest son will get the property, then there may not be such difficulty. But historically, there have been challenging situations. And in the modern age, it can be very challenging. And for instance, if supposing there were two sons in the family, I'll just make it simple, and one of them is interested in continuing to manage a property, a farm, for instance, or an estate, then the other son may wish to receive a portion. And, sometimes in history, things have been just divided up, but oftentimes what it means is that a parent will give some financial and maybe some material things to the other son, and then the one son will continue to own and operate the property, which means his family thrives in that way, and the other son has to go out and find another way of making a living and sustaining himself. So those kinds of things put strains on the bonds, and they produce, very interesting situations. And sometimes they will produce outcomes that then will carry into subsequent generations or subsequent incarnations of a person, because they are left with some painful rendering of that bond. And whether it's the same soul that shows up then in another lifetime, or that gets acted out with a different soul in a lifetime, in a sense, it doesn't matter. It has to be worked out. They have to go back and do that. When I work on people energetically, I do actually have to go back many times and look at the nature of the bond that was strained in a previous lifetime, and then go back and work with those souls to try to create some situation where there's some peace and comfort in being able to bring a resolution to that, to resolve that tension, so that both souls can move forward then without carrying that karma any longer. And that's an interesting point, which really is a very important point. And that is that whenever there's a conflict, even if one person wins and the other person loses, so to speak, both people carry a karma. And so the resolution of this, I found in my experience, very much so, is that both souls need to come to peace with the situation, which means they have to make peace with each other. And I do that usually on the silent level. I don't do that verbally. But it's kind of just showing them a possibility that they don't need to continue to suffer through this lifetime and multiple lifetimes. It doesn't matter whether they're both on the planet at the same time, but just that they get to a point where they can make resolution of the conflict that has existed, the pain, the suffering is let go of, and even the sense of pride and victory that the other one may have. And so they can create that kind of peace that comes of mutual understanding and mutual empathy. So it's a very beautiful thing that can happen. And the energy shift is really lovely to see. It's something that I can sense. And then usually the people sense it, even if they don't see it directly the way I do. They'll have a feeling of ease that comes. And it's very profound. It's a very deep feeling of ease that comes. And they just feel like, I can breathe again. There's something, I didn't even realize I wasn't breathing, but now I realized, I wasn't breathing as much as I should, but now I can take that breath and I can relax and I can just go forth and live my life and enjoy it and not make the same mistake again and not, put myself into a situation where I create a strain with some member of my family this lifetime and can ease those bonds. So those bonds are very important and they're very much related to our karma. Karma comes to us from, we sometimes say karmic agents, which are situations and people that show up in our lives that bring us certain experiences, certain challenges that we need in order to learn and grow. A more exciting, if you will, kind of connection and bond with people is the bond we call soulmates. Soulmates are fellow travelers. They're people that we experience again and again in incarnations who help us along the way, share our experiences, provide support. They do sometimes provide challenges too. But the main idea with a soulmate is that there's a comfort in being with them on the journey. And that comfort often is immediately apparent when you meet them in this lifetime. You just have that sense that you've known them before, you know that they're on your side, that they're with you, that they're like a friend or a buddy or a sibling, or even a parent, somebody that you're really comfortable with right from the beginning. And sometimes if you're attuned to it, you may recognize, oh yes, we were brothers in the last lifetime, or we were best friends, or we were business partners, or something. You get some sense that you had a very important association in a previous lifetime. And you can have many soulmates of that type in any lifetime. They may be with you throughout your lifetime, or they may be with you, for some period in your life. So it's not like you meet somebody, and although the feeling can be very profound, and you go like, wow, I really want to be with that person. The answer is yes, but not necessarily forever in this lifetime, not necessarily throughout the rest of your life. It's a nice association if it's a situation where maybe you're going to be spouses. That can work out very well. It can be really delightful and you can have a wonderful relationship. But it does not necessarily have to be that way. And then there's another kind of relationship which I've only very recently become aware of because somebody suggested it to me. And that's the relationship known as twin flames. The idea of twin flames is that one soul is divided into two, not as not as some qualities to one and some to another, although it is said that one is more feminine, the other is more masculine. I don't even know from my own experience yet whether that's true. I just haven't had enough experience. But what I have seen and what I've read a great deal about is that that relationship is really profound. And when twin flames meet, the purpose of meeting is to reunite that one soul that's in two bodies into one, and to produce a very powerful relationship. According to the things I've written, and I have no reason to doubt that not true, no reason to doubt that they're true, is that when you are with a twin flame, if you are not in a very highly evolved state, which is most of us, that it's like looking in a mirror, and you really, your twin flame really shows you all of your qualities, your good qualities, and the ones that you don't like so very much. And that experience also can be very, very intense. And so twin flames do not always work out in a lifetime. They may have a very passionate affair if they're in that kind of a situation, where they're going to be mates, because they can be siblings, of course. But the energy between them, that bond, is really intense. And I've looked at that, and that is really an interesting thing to see, just how intense, how strong, and protected, if you will, stable that bond is. So that even when not such good things happen, you get into a big fight, you go your separate ways, the bond remains. And that's one of the striking things then about a twin flame bond, is that it does not end when a relationship ends. It goes on because you're basically one soul. And it can be a marvelous thing because the excitement that's involved in that is so intense. And the union, the sense of union, is so powerful. Now, some people, of course, not knowing an awful lot about higher states of consciousness, have come to assume that union on that level is, the grand awakening of a unified soul. But it's pretty clear to me, well, it's very clear to me, as I look at this, that that kind of unification is a basis for experiencing true unity consciousness, the consciousness in which everything is seen in terms of itself, but it does not necessarily produce that, and that other techniques, other knowledge is required to really achieve that level of spiritual development that we call unity consciousness, that level of totality. But that union on the level of soul is really a very powerful, powerful thing. And so it's not a goal in and of itself. That is to say, finding your twin flame is not necessarily the ultimate goal of your life. The goal of all lives, the goal of all incarnations, is personal evolution and the achievement of higher states of consciousness. And so all of these different relationships are all just different ways in which nature gives us opportunities to evolve to higher states of consciousness and to deal or to learn all the life lessons that we need to learn along the way. So it's a really marvelous thing. That's my particular take, at least on twin flames particularly. But I have a good sense from what I've seen that I'm on the right track on that one. So I'm going to stop here, see if there are any questions from the folks either here in the room or out in cyberspace. Everybody's ready for me to move on. So I'm going to thank you all for participating in this recording. Yeah, we have a question.
Okay, what about the energy when supposedly we recruit our tormentors to give us an experience.
Well, that's our part of our karma.
Okay.
And whether we recruit them or they're just coming to us because that's what's supposed to happen in this lifetime, it doesn't matter. They're part of our karma, but they're all part of our karma. Every experience, every relationship that we have is part of our karma. It may be a big piece or a little piece, and it may stay with us for a long time or just briefly. It depends on how we deal with that. And, we may, be driving down the street and we have an accident and somebody, gets all mad and, maybe they're threatening to sue. And so, it's like it's a big upheaval, and you say, well, okay, that's a karma, So you can go like, okay, I understand this is happening. I can deal with this. So you work through that and then it's done with. And so whatever karmic reasons were there to produce that kind of situation, now you finish that. Or on the other hand, if you go like, no, you were in the wrong and you fight them and you wind up in court or there's a big battle and there's a lot of animosity, you continue that karma. You don't let go of that karma. So, and you may carry that, you may go your separate ways, but both parties may carry that karma then, through your lifetime and perhaps into future lifetimes. So we just take it as it comes, whatever comes to us. The thing kind of behind that, and I think it's the reason that, I've heard Maharishi be very kind of matter of fact about the people in our lives. And it's like, oh, if you want to be married, just marry somebody. And it was kind of his attitude. And I think what it was is that it's all just an opportunity to learn and grow. And so, there's this person or there's that person. That's why, some people get very excited if you read the literature on this, the soulmates, oh yeah, soulmate. Yeah, they have a special feeling, but it's all just the karma of working out relationships. And the same thing with twin flames, when you go, oh my goodness, I just can't even imagine such a relationship. This is so incredible. My heart is just exploding, ecstasy like that. And it's great. But it's just an opportunity for learning and growing. It's just more fun. But it's also more challenging. So sometimes a really low-key one is a good one. I don't know how much control we have over that. It's kind of like nature gives us what we're supposed to get. So sometimes it's a real intense relationship, and sometimes it's much quieter. There's peace. Arranged marriages do actually work if the two parties are good to each other. In arranged marriage, you often don't know the person you're marrying until usually immediately before. You have to discover each other. You have to go through the whole process. And, you'll discover the things you like and things you don't like so much. And, but if you play the role of the spouse, and that usually works best in a society where the roles are fairly well defined, because that's usually the kind of society that has arranged marriages, then people play the roles and they're happy. And that doesn't necessarily mean that there's a great deal of intimacy. In the usual sense of the word, I always think, I don't know why, it's just because I loved it so much, the Fiddler on the Roof. And there's a wonderful scene in there where Octavian asks his wife, do you love me? And she says, well, I darn your socks, I cook your food, I take care of your children. She names the acts of service. And he says, but do you love me? And then there's this beautiful song that they sing where they finally kind of bring to the surface what is underneath, which is, yeah, I play the role of your wife, you play the role of my husband. We love each other. And there is an intimacy. It's just not a big, explosive, dramatic intimacy. It's just a really quiet intimacy that underlies that they have this commitment. And, this commitment not only as a bond between the two people, but then there's the family and the community and the land and all of that. This all comes together as love. So it's an interesting perspective, I think, on
our relationships, who really matters and how we love them. But the goal is evolution. The goal is always evolution. When you keep that in mind, it may be a little easier to forgive some of the things that come up in a relationship. Very good. Okay.